The metal door of the airlock made a loud hissing sound as it slid open. Kirith walked into Research Station Osiris slowly and carefully. She had been doing this for so long that she didn't even think about it anymore. Every step was planned. Every movement was controlled. 300 years of being careful had made it feel natural to her now. The station was busy with people moving around, carrying equipment and talking to each other. Bright lights lit up the white hallways. The air smelled clean and recycled, like all space stations did. Kirith pulled her protective suit a little tighter around herself and kept her gloved hands close to her body. A tall human man with short brown hair walked up to her. He had a friendly smile on his face and wore a blue engineer's uniform with grease stains on the sleeves. He looked like he had just come from fixing something in the engine room. "Hey there. Welcome aboard," the man said cheerfully. He stuck out his right hand toward her. "I'm Jake Miller. I'm the chief engineer here on Osiris. You must be our new xenobiology consultant." Kirith's eyes went wide behind her transparent face shield. She jumped backward quickly, almost bumping into the wall behind her. "Don't," she said sharply, her voice cutting through the air. Jake stopped moving immediately. His hand was still hanging in the air between them. Confusion spread across his face. His smile faded a little bit. He looked at his own hand like he was trying to figure out what was wrong with it. "Did I do something wrong?" Jake asked slowly. He lowered his hand but kept looking at her with concern in his eyes. Kirith took a deep breath. This was always the hardest part. The explaining. The watching people's faces change when they understood what she was. She had done this hundreds of times over the centuries, but it never got easier. "I'm Valkyrie," she said. Her voice was quiet but firm. She tried to keep her tone steady and professional. "My species, we're different from most others. Our skin produces a contact toxin. It's not something I can control. It's just part of who we are." Jake tilted his head slightly, listening carefully. He didn't move away or look scared yet. That was unusual. Kirith continued. "The toxin is lethal to all carbon-based life forms. That includes humans. If you touch my skin directly, even for just a few seconds, you'll experience rapid cellular breakdown. Your cells will start dying almost immediately. The pain is—" She paused, remembering her brother's screams. "It's extremely painful, and then you die, usually within minutes." She waited for the usual reaction. The fear, the disgust, the way people would take several steps backward and look at her like she was a monster. She had seen it so many times before. But Jake's face didn't show fear. Instead, his eyes got brighter. He leaned forward slightly, like he was really interested in what she was saying. "Wait, seriously? That's actually incredible," Jake said with genuine excitement in his voice. "So your skin cells produce a neurotoxin as a natural defense mechanism? What's the molecular structure like? Is it protein-based or something else? How does it remain stable on your skin without affecting your own cells? Do you have special receptors that—" "You're not afraid?" Kirith interrupted him. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. This human was asking science questions instead of running away. Jake stopped his rapid-fire questions and shrugged casually. "Afraid? Why should I be afraid?" He said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "You just told me not to touch you, so I won't touch you. Pretty simple, right?" He smiled again, and this time it was even warmer than before. "But if you're okay with it, I'd love to hear more about your biology. I've never met a Valkyrie before. Actually, I don't think there are any records of Valkyrie working on human stations. This is amazing. I probably have about 100 questions, if you're willing to answer them." Kirith just stared at him through her face shield. In all her years and all the stations and planets she had visited, nobody had ever reacted like this. Most people treated her like a walking bomb. They would assign her quarters far away from everyone else. They would leave her meals outside her door. They would communicate through screens and speakers instead of face-to-face. But this human, this Jake Miller, was standing here excited to talk to her. He wasn't looking at her like she was dangerous. He was looking at her like she was interesting. "You really want to know about my biology?" she asked quietly. "Most people just want to know how far away they should stay from me." Jake laughed. It was a genuine, warm sound. Well, yeah, I'd like to know the safe distance for practical reasons. But mainly I'm just curious. I'm an engineer, sure, but I've always been fascinated by xenobiology. The way different species evolve to survive in different environments is just, it's beautiful, you know? He rubbed the back of his neck, looking a little embarrassed. Sorry, I get excited about this stuff. My crew says I ask too many questions, but if it bothers you, I can... No, Kyria said quickly. Maybe too quickly. No, it's fine. It's actually refreshing. For the first time in decades, Kyria felt something strange happening in her chest. It was a small feeling, just a tiny flutter, but it was there. She had learned to stop hoping for connections with people a long time ago. Hope only led to disappointment and loneliness. But standing here in this bright hallway, with this curious human who wasn't afraid of her, who wanted to understand her instead of avoid her, something shifted. Something changed. It was small, fragile, like a tiny seed pushing through frozen ground. It felt almost like hope. I have a shift in the lab in an hour, Kyria said slowly. If you want, you could stop by after your engineering duties are done. I could answer some of your questions then. Jake's face lit up like she had just given him the best gift in the world. Really? That would be amazing. Yeah, I'll definitely come by. I get off duty at 1800 hours. Does that work for you? Kyria nodded. That works. Great. I'll see you then. Jake gave her a small wave and started walking backward down the hallway. He bumped into a cargo cart, stumbled, laughed at himself, and then turned around to walk properly. Kyria watched him go, a small smile forming on her lips behind her face shield. Maybe this assignment wouldn't be so lonely after all. 3 weeks had passed since Kyria first arrived at Research Station Osiris. Something unexpected had happened during that time. Every single evening, she found herself in the xenobiology lab with Jake. It had become a routine she actually looked forward to. He would finish his engineering work, grab 2 cups of coffee, and show up at her lab door with that same easy smile he had on the first day. Jake always kept his distance. He never got too close. He was careful in a way that didn't feel like fear, but more like respect. Still, even with the space between them, his presence somehow filled the entire room. The lab didn't feel cold and empty anymore when he was there. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Kyria didn't feel completely alone. Tonight was like most other nights. Kyria was hunched over her workbench, analyzing some samples from a deep space probe. The lab was quiet except for the soft humming of equipment and the occasional beep from her monitors. The door slid open and Jake walked in carrying 2 insulated cups. The smell of fresh coffee drifted through the air. Coffee, Jake called out, already walking toward her workstation. He set 1 cup down on the side of the bench, then carefully slid the other cup across the smooth surface toward her. He was always so careful about this. He never handed things directly to her. He would slide them across tables or set them down where she could pick them up safely. It was thoughtful in a way that made her chest feel warm. Thank you, Kyria said, reaching for the cup. She smiled behind her transparent face shield, even though she knew he couldn't see it clearly. Jake pulled up a stool on his side of the workbench and sat down. He took a sip of his coffee and watched her work for a moment. There was a comfortable silence between them, not the awkward kind where people don't know what to say. The good kind where people are just happy to be around each other. Can I ask you something personal? Jake said after a while. His voice was softer than usual. Kyria looked up from her data pad. You usually do, she replied with a slight tease in her voice. Jake asked her personal questions all the time. About her homeworld, about Velcari culture, about what she liked to eat, what music she listened to, what she thought about when she couldn't sleep. But this time Jake hesitated. He turned his coffee cup in his hands, looking at it instead of at her. How long has it been since you touched someone? The question hit her like a physical blow. Kyria's hand stopped moving over her data pad. She went completely still. The lab seemed quieter suddenly. Even the machines seemed to hum more softly. She had been asked many questions over the years, but nobody had ever asked her that one. 307 years, Kyria said finally. Her voice was steady and controlled. She had practiced talking about this for centuries, making it sound like it was just a fact and not something that hurt. I was 12 years old when it happened. Jake didn't say anything. He just listened, giving her space to continue if she wanted to. I had a younger brother, Kirith went on. The memories were old but still sharp. His name was Theron. He was 9. We were playing in the garden behind our house. It was a chasing game, something silly that kids play everywhere. I was winning and he was laughing, trying to catch me. She paused, her fingers gripping the edge of the workbench. I tripped over a root, started to fall. Theron tried to catch me. He grabbed my arm. Just my arm. Skin to skin. Maybe for 3 seconds. Maybe 4. The lab was completely silent now. Even Jake had stopped moving. He started screaming immediately. Kirith continued, her voice still eerily calm. The toxin works fast on children. Their bodies are smaller. Less mass to fight it. He collapsed in the garden. My parents came running. They tried everything, but there's no antidote. There's no cure. You just have to watch and wait. She finally looked up at Jake. His face was pale, his eyes wide with horror and sadness. For minutes, she said quietly. That's how long it took. For minutes of him screaming and crying and begging for it to stop. And I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even hold him while he died. I just stood there watching my baby brother die because of me. Kirith took a shaky breath. After that, my parents sent me away. Not because they were angry, but because they were terrified. Terrified I would accidentally hurt someone else. Terrified I would hurt them. So I've been alone ever since. 307 years of never touching another living person. Jake was quiet for a long moment. The silence stretched between them. But it didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt like he was really thinking about what she had said, really feeling it. I'm sorry, Jake said finally. His voice was rough with emotion. I'm so sorry that happened to you, that you've had to carry that. It's simply what I am, Kirith replied, using the same word she always used. The practice response that made it easier to bear. It's my nature. I can't change it. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, Jake said softly, looking directly at her through the barrier of her face shield. Kirith opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say anything, a loud blaring alarm cut through the lab. Red lights started flashing on the walls. The emergency warning system was screaming at them. Warning. Coolant leak detected in biocontainment section 7. Sealing emergency doors. Warning. Kirith's head snapped toward the containment area. Section 7 was right next to them. The heavy metal doors started sliding shut with a loud grinding sound. No, no, no. Jake jumped off a stool and ran toward the doors, but they slammed shut before he could reach them. The locks engaged with a solid thunk. The ventilation system started making a strange wheezing sound. Then it stopped completely. Jake pulled out his communication device and tried to call for help. Nothing. The coolant leak must have damaged the systems. They were cut off. The emergency shaft, Jake said suddenly, pointing to a small maintenance tunnel in the corner of the lab. It was barely visible behind some equipment. That tunnel connects to the next section. You can fit through there and unlock the door from the other side. Kirith looked at the narrow opening. It was small, very small, maybe 2 feet wide at most. I'd have to remove my protective suit, she said slowly. The suit is too bulky. I won't fit through with it on. Then take it off, Jake said. He was already moving equipment out of the way to clear a path to the tunnel. I'll guide you through, talk you through each turn. Jake, Kirith's voice was sharp with fear. Look at that space. It's not just narrow. It's tight, really tight. There are pipes and wires in there, sharp edges, rough surfaces. She shook her head. In a space that's small, you'll have to touch me to guide me through. There's no way to avoid it. Jake stopped moving. He looked at the tunnel, then at her, then back at the tunnel. She could see him doing the math in his head, calculating the risks. The ventilation system wheezed one more time and went completely silent. The air in the lab would only last so long with both of them breathing it. Jake turned back to her. His face was set with determination. Then we'd better hurry, he said calmly, before I run out of oxygen to survive the aftermath. You'll die, Kyria said. Her voice cracked for the first time. The careful control she always maintained was slipping. You heard what I said. For minutes. That's all it took for my brother. You're bigger, so maybe you'll last longer, but... I'm human, Jake interrupted. He walked closer to her, stopping at the safe distance they always maintained. Humans are stubborn. Our biology is weird. We survive things we shouldn't survive. We heal from things that kill other species. Maybe I'll die. Maybe I won't. But if we stay in here, we definitely both die. He looked her straight in the eyes. I trust you, Kyria, and I trust my own stubborn human body to fight whatever happens. Now, please, take off that suit and get through that tunnel. I'll be right behind you. Kyria's hands trembled as she reached for the seals on her protective suit. She had worn protective gear for 307 years, and now she was about to take it off, knowing that she might kill the first person who had treated her like a friend in longer than she could remember. But they were out of options, and the air was already starting to feel thin. This is insane, Kyria whispered. Her hands were shaking as she unsealed the clasps on her protective suit. The top half was already hanging loose around her waist. Her bare arms were exposed to the air for the first time in months. Her pale blue skin seemed to glow slightly under the lab's emergency lighting. Probably, Jake agreed. He was pulling on a second pair of thick work gloves over the ones he was already wearing. But I've been doing some reading over the past few weeks. Late at night, when I couldn't sleep. Medical journals, xenobiology reports, comparative species studies. He flexed his fingers in the double-layered gloves, testing their thickness. Humans have kind of ridiculous healing abilities compared to most other species in the galaxy. Our cells regenerate way faster than they should. Our immune systems are hyperactive to the point where it's actually a problem sometimes. We get autoimmune diseases because our bodies attack themselves when they run out of real threats to fight. That won't save you from neurotoxic cellular breakdown. Kyria's voice was rising with panic. She had stopped undressing and was just staring at him. Jake, this isn't like fighting off an infection or healing a cut. This is direct cellular death. The toxin destroys cell walls on contact. It doesn't matter how fast you heal if there's nothing left to heal. Jake met her eyes through her face shield. His expression was calm. Too calm for someone who was about to do something that might kill him. Maybe you're right. Maybe it won't be enough. But maybe it'll slow the process down. Buy me enough time to get us out of here. He took a step closer to the tunnel entrance. Look, I've been reading about human exposure to other species' natural toxins. There was this case where a human diplomat survived contact with Thraxian whose skin secretes acid. Guy's hand was basically melted, but he lived. Took 3 months to fully heal, but he lived. Doctors said any other species would have died within minutes. The Thraxian acid is nothing compared to Velcari toxin, Kyria said, but her voice was quieter now, less certain. I know. I read about your species, too. Every report I could find. Jake's voice was steady and sure. But here's the thing. Nobody's ever tested Velcari toxin on humans before. Because why would they? It kills everyone else. So everyone assumes it'll kill us too. But what if we're different? What if our crazy, overreactive biology can fight it? The air was getting thinner. Kyria could feel it. Her breathing was coming faster. Try pulling enough oxygen from the sealed room. I trust our stubborn biology, Jake said firmly. Humans don't know when to quit. Our bodies don't know when to quit. Now please go, before we both suffocate in here and make this whole argument pointless. Kyria stared at him for one more second. Then she nodded and pulled off the rest of her suit. She stood there in just her basic clothing, feeling more vulnerable and exposed than she had in centuries. Her skin was completely bare. Deadly. Dangerous. She turned toward the maintenance shaft and squeezed herself into the opening. It was immediately clear that this was going to be worse than she thought. The space was incredibly tight. Her shoulders barely fit through. Pipes and wires lined the walls, leaving almost no room to move. Okay, I'm going to put my hand on your shoulder to guide you. Jake's voice came from behind her. There's a turn coming up in about 3 feet. You need to go left. Kyria felt the pressure of his gloved hand on her left shoulder. Even through the thick material, she could feel his warmth. It had been so long since anyone had touched her, even with protection. The contact made her want to cry and pull away at the same time. Left turn coming up. Slow down a bit, Jake instructed. His voice was steady and calm, like he was just giving her normal directions. Curious shifted her body to the left. The tunnel was getting even tighter. She had to pull herself forward using her hands, dragging her body along the rough metal surface. Then she felt it, a sharp snag, the sound of fabric tearing. Jake's glove had caught on a jagged piece of metal sticking out from the tunnel wall. The material ripped open like paper. His bare hand fell directly onto her exposed shoulder, skin-to-skin contact. Kirith's entire body went rigid. She wanted to scream at him to pull away, but her voice wouldn't work. Time seemed to slow down. 1 second of contact. 2 seconds. 3. She could feel exactly where his hand was touching her. Could feel the warmth of his palm against her shoulder blade. 4 seconds. 5. Jake made a small sound. Not quite a gasp. Not quite a cry. Just a sharp intake of breath. 6 seconds. 7. Keep going. Jake's voice was tight with pain, but he didn't pull his hand away. He was still trying to guide her through the tunnel, even as her toxin was seeping into his skin. 8 seconds. 9. Kirith found her voice and her strength at the same time. She surged forward, scrambling through the tunnel as fast as she could. Her knees scraped against the metal. Her hands slipped on the smooth surfaces. She didn't care. She just had to get through, had to reach the emergency release. Behind her, she heard Jake gasp again. This time it was definitely pain. Her hand found the emergency release panel. She slammed her palm against it with all her strength. The door on the other side of the tunnel unlocked with a loud clank. Kirith pushed it open and fell through onto the floor of the next section. She spun around just in time to see Jake stumble out of the tunnel behind her. He took 2 shaky steps forward and then collapsed onto his knees. His right hand was clutching his left shoulder where he had touched her. Jake! Kirith crawled toward him but stopped herself just short of touching him again. Jake's hand fell away from his shoulder and Kirith saw the damage. The skin where they had made contact was black. Not just dark. Actually black, like charred meat. The tissue was blistered and cracked. Dark veins were spreading outward from the contact point, creeping down his arm and up toward his neck like poison roots growing under his skin. This was it. This was what her toxin did. This was what had killed her brother. What had killed everyone who had ever accidentally touched her. "I'm sorry," Kirith whispered. Tears were streaming down her face behind her shield. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." But then she noticed something. The black skin at the very edge of the wound was changing. The color was shifting from pure black to dark gray, then from gray to an angry red. The edges of the destroyed tissue were turning pink. New skin was forming, growing, fighting back against the toxin. Still alive? Jake managed to say through gritted teeth. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscles standing out in his neck. Sweat was pouring down his face. His whole body was shaking with pain. But he was alive, and somehow, impossibly, he was healing. The emergency doors to the section burst open. The medical team came running in with stretchers and equipment. A woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun ran straight to Jake. She was wearing a doctor's coat with the name Dr. Helen Rhodes stitched on it. "What happened?" Dr. Rhodes demanded, already scanning Jake with a handheld medical device. Her eyes went wide as she looked at the readings. That's not possible. More medical staff surrounded Jake, lifting him onto a stretcher. They attached monitoring equipment to him. The machine started beeping rapidly, displaying numbers and graphs that Kirith couldn't fully understand. Velcari toxin exposure, Kirith said quietly. 9 seconds of direct skin contact. Maybe 10. It's my fault. His cells are regenerating. Dr. Rhodes interrupted, staring at her scanner like it was showing her something from a dream. The toxin is still active. It's still destroying tissue. But his body is producing new cells faster than the toxin can kill them. They're fighting each other in real time. She looked up at Kirith with an expression of complete disbelief. "His cells are winning," she whispered. "I've never seen anything like this in my entire career. This shouldn't be possible." The medical team rushed Jake out of the section, wheeling him toward the medical bay at a run. Dr. Rhodes jogged alongside the stretcher, never taking her eyes off her scanner. Kyria stood alone in the empty corridor, staring at her own hands. Hands that had just touched someone for the first time in 307 years. Hands that should have killed him. But somehow, Jake was still alive. Absolutely not, Kyria said firmly. She crossed her arms and stood her ground in the doorway of the medical bay. I'm not letting you do this. Come on, Jake replied. He was already sitting on the examination table, wearing a simple medical gown. His left shoulder was still wrapped in bandages from the incident 2 days ago. It's controlled exposure. Full medical supervision. Dr. Rhodes says my body is building antibodies or something. Some kind of adaptive immunity response. Dr. Helen Rhodes was standing next to the exam table, reviewing data on her tablet. She looked up and nodded. His immune system has done something remarkable. The toxin antibodies in his bloodstream have increased by 40% in just 2 days. His body is learning to recognize and fight the Velcari neurotoxin at a cellular level. She swiped through some charts on her screen. Based on the data, each control contact should be less damaging than the last. His body should adapt faster each time, build stronger defenses. Theoretically, after enough exposures, he might develop a complete immunity. Kyria stared at her. Theoretically? Did you just say theoretically? She turned her gaze to Jake. You're volunteering to be a test subject based on a theory? Jake smiled that easy, confident smile of his, the one that made her both want to trust him and shake some sense into him at the same time. For science? He said, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. This isn't science. This is madness, Kyria protested, but her voice was weaker now. She could see the determination in Jake's eyes. He had already made up his mind. Dr. Rhodes moved closer to Kyria. I understand your concern, but Jake is right about one thing. We've never had the opportunity to study human resistance to Velcari toxin before. If there's even a chance that humans can develop immunity, it could change everything, not just for Jake, but potentially for human-Velcari relations across the galaxy. And if it kills him? Kyria's voice was barely a whisper. It won't, Jake said with absolute certainty. I can feel it. My shoulder barely even hurts anymore. 2 days ago, it felt like my entire arm was on fire. Now it just feels like a bad sunburn. My body is winning this fight. Over the next 2 weeks, Kyria watched something impossible happen. Jake came to Medical Bay every other day for controlled exposure tests. Each test was carefully monitored. Each contact was measured in exact seconds. The first test was fingertip to fingertip, just Kyria's index finger touching Jake's for 5 seconds. Jake's finger turned red and swollen, but there was no blackening, no tissue death, just inflammation that faded within an hour. The second test was 3 days later. This time they pressed their palms together for 8 seconds. Jake's palm blistered, but again, no cell death. Dr. Rhodes recorded everything, shaking her head in amazement at the readings. By the fourth test, they were holding hands for 15 seconds. Jake's hand hurt afterward. She could see it in the tension around his eyes, but he never complained, never asked to stop. Why are you doing this? Kyria asked him after the 6th test. They were sitting in the medical bay waiting room. Jake was flexing his fingers, working through the lingering pain. Because nobody should have spent 300 years without touching another person, Jake said simply. He looked at her with those warm brown eyes. Because you deserve to be able to shake someone's hand, to hug someone, to feel connected to the world around you. Something in Kyria's chest cracked open when he said that. A wall she had built over centuries. A defense against hope and longing and all the painful wishes she had locked away. She felt tears burning in her eyes. Each time they did a contact test, Jake's body adapted faster. The pain decreased. The healing time shortened. His immune system was learning, evolving, becoming stronger with each exposure. Kyria watched him push through the discomfort and pain, all for the possibility of touch, for the possibility of her not being alone anymore. And something ancient and frozen in her heart began to thaw. Then, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in the 3rd week, everything changed. The station rocked violently. Alarms started blaring throughout every section. The lights flickered and went red. Emergency protocols activated automatically. Warning. Hull breach detected. Warning. Hostile forces detected. All personnel to emergency stations. Pirates. Raiders from the outer territories who targeted research stations for valuable data and equipment. Kirith was in her lab when the attack started. She grabbed onto her workbench as another explosion shook the station. She could hear weapons fire in the corridors outside. Shouting. Running footsteps. She tried to reach Jake on her communicator. No response. The communication systems were jammed or damaged. The attack lasted 20 minutes. Station security fought back hard. The pirates had expected an easy target, but Osiris had former military personnel on the crew. The raiders were driven off, fleeing back to their ships before reinforcements could arrive. But 20 minutes was long enough for damage. Serious damage. Kirith ran through the corridors, searching for Jake. She found crew members helping the injured. She found blown-out panels and scorch marks on the walls. But she didn't find Jake. "Has anyone seen Jake Miller?" she asked everyone she passed. Most people just shook their heads, too busy with their own emergencies. Finally, a young technician pointed down a damaged corridor. "I saw him go into Section 12 before the blast. But that section's sealed now. The explosion ruptured the oxygen lines. It's filled with toxic gas." Kirith's blood went cold. She ran to Section 12. A rescue team was already there, standing outside the sealed door. They had equipment spread out, trying to figure out how to get inside. Through the small window in the door, Kirith could see Jake. He was lying on the floor, unconscious. There was blood on his uniform. Shrapnel from the explosion had hit him. He wasn't moving. "We can't get in," the team leader was saying. He was a big man with a shaved head and a scar across his cheek. "The gas will kill anyone who enters within 30 seconds. We're trying to vent it out, but the system is damaged. It's going to take at least an hour, maybe more." "He doesn't have an hour," another rescue worker said, looking at the medical scanner press against the door. "He's losing blood. His oxygen levels are already critical." Kirith stepped forward. "I can get through there," she said. Her voice was calm and clear, even though her heart was pounding. The team leader turned to look at her. "You're Velcari, right?" "Yeah. Your biology can handle the gas. But the door is sealed from the inside. You'd have to go through the damaged ventilation system." He pointed to a blown-out vent shaft in the ceiling. "It's the only way in." "Then that's what I'll do. Even if you get to him, you can't carry him out," the team leader said. "He's got to weigh at least 180 pounds. Plus he's injured and unconscious. You'd have to maintain full body contact to carry him through those ducts. Your toxin—" "I know," Kirith interrupted. She was already moving toward the vent shaft, calculating the route in her mind. "I know what it means." The team leader grabbed her arm, then immediately let go, remembering her toxin. "You'll kill him. Even if you get him out, the exposure will kill him." Kirith looked through the window, at Jake's motionless form, at the man who had endured pain and tests for 2 weeks just so she wouldn't have to be alone, the man who had trusted his stubborn human biology to survive something that killed everyone else. "Maybe," Kirith said quietly, "or maybe his stubborn human biology will surprise us one more time." She pulled herself up into the ventilation shaft and disappeared into the darkness, crawling toward the man who had given her hope. Kirith crawled through the damaged ventilation shaft as fast as she could. The toxic gas didn't bother her. Her Velcari lungs filtered out automatically, but her heart was racing with fear for what she would find on the other side. She dropped down through the vent opening into Section 12. The room was filled with yellowish haze of gas. Sparks were still flying from damaged electrical panels. And there, in the middle of the floor, was Jake. He was lying on his back, not moving. Blood was pooling beneath him, spreading out across the metal floor. A piece of shrapnel had torn through his uniform and into his side. Another piece had cut across his leg. Kirith ran to him and dropped to her knees beside him. No time for gloves. No time for protective gear. No time for careful planning or medical supervision. She pressed her bare hands directly against the worst wound on his side, applying pressure to stop the bleeding. Her skin touched his. Toxin began transferring immediately. Jake's eyes fluttered open. They were unfocused and glassy with pain, but they found her face. "Hey," he whispered. His voice was so weak she could barely hear it. "Stay with me," Kyria said firmly. She could feel his blood, warm and wet, flow between her fingers. "Don't you dare die on me, Jake Miller. Not after everything we've been through." She slid one arm under his shoulders and the other under his knees. She lifted him up, pulling his body against hers. Full contact, his skin against her skin, his chest against her chest. Her arms wrapped completely around him. This wasn't fingertip to fingertip in a controlled medical environment. This wasn't a 5-second test with doctors standing by. This was full body contact with no protection at all. Jake's entire body convulsed in her arms. A cry tore from his throat, raw and agonized. His back arched. Every muscle in his body tensed and seized. But his eyes stayed open. He stayed conscious. "Keep talking to me," Kyria begged. She started moving toward the vent shaft, carrying him. Every step was difficult. He was heavy and she wasn't strong. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. "Say something. Anything. Just let me know you're still here. This really hurts." Jake managed to gasp out. His hands were gripping her arms. She could feel him shaking against her. "I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Tears were streaming down Kyria's face. She could see what her toxin was doing to him. His skin was turning red everywhere they touched. Dark veins were appearing, spreading like cracks through porcelain. "I'm so sorry I have to do this to you." "Worth it," Jake whispered. Kyria pulled herself up into the ventilation shaft, still holding Jake tight against her. The shaft was even harder to navigate while carrying someone. Her muscles screamed with the effort. Her shoulders scraped against the metal walls. But she kept moving. 1 minute of full contact. 2 minutes. 3. Jake's breathing was getting rough and ragged. She could feel his heart pounding against her chest, beating too fast. His body was fighting a war against itself. The toxin was spreading through his bloodstream, destroying cells. But his immune system was fighting back, producing new cells, building antibodies, adapting in real time. For minutes. 5, 6. "Talk to me, Jake," Kyria said again. She was crawling through the shaft on her knees and one hand, the other arm still holding him against her. "Tell me about engineering. Tell me about your family. Tell me anything. Grew up in Colorado." Jake's voice was barely there. "Mountains. Wanted to be astronaut since I was 6. 7 minutes. 8. 9. Kyria could see the end of the shaft ahead. The rescue team was waiting there. She could hear their voices calling to her. Just a little further. 10 minutes of continuous skin-to-skin contact. She fell out of the shaft and onto the floor of the corridor. The rescue team surrounded them immediately. Kyria released Jake and rolled away, giving them space to work. 2 medics grabbed Jake and lifted him onto a stretcher. They were shouting medical terminology at each other, attaching equipment, running scans. The whole team started running toward the medical bay. Kyria pushed herself to her feet and followed, but she stayed back, stayed away. She looked down at her hands, her bare hands that had just held someone for 10 minutes straight. Dr. Rhodes met them at the medical bay doors. She took one look at Jake and started barking orders. The medical team rushed him into the emergency treatment room. Kyria tried to follow, but Dr. Rhodes stopped her. "You need to stay out here," the doctor said gently. "Let us work." Kyria backed away until her shoulders hit the wall. Then she slid down to the floor and sat there, staring at her hands. "I killed him," she whispered to herself. "I killed him." Hours passed. Kyria didn't move from her spot on the floor. Medical staff came and went from the treatment room. Nobody would tell her anything. They just gave her sympathetic looks and hurried past. 3 days went by. Kyria barely slept, barely ate. She just sat in that same spot in the hallway, waiting. On the 3rd day, Dr. Rhodes came out of the treatment room. She was smiling, actually smiling. "He's awake," she said, "and you need to see this." Kyria stood up on shaky legs and walked into the room. Jake was lying in a medical bed, propped up on pillows. He looked terrible, exhausted and pale and covered in bandages. but his eyes were open and clear. Dr. Rhodes pulled up a screen showing Jake's medical scans. The shrapnel wounds are healing normally, but look at this. She pointed to readings that showed cellular activity. We've been monitoring his exposure to your toxin for the first 6 hours. His body was in critical condition. The toxin was winning. But then something incredible happened. She pulled up more data. His immune system went into overdrive. His cells started regenerating faster than we've ever recorded in any species. The toxin kept trying to destroy tissue, but his body just kept making more. After about 12 hours, his body started producing antibodies that actually neutralized the toxin. Dr. Rose looked at Kirith with wonder in her eyes. He's completely adapted. Your toxin doesn't affect him anymore at all. He's immune, permanently immune. Kirith couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She just stared at Jake. Jake turned his head on the pillow and looked at her. He was searching her face from across the room. Then he slowly extended his hand toward her. "Come here," he said softly. Kirith approached the bed like she was walking in a dream. Each step felt unreal. She reached the side of his bed and stood there, looking down at his outstretched hand. She was afraid to hope, afraid to believe, afraid that this was some cruel trick, and she would touch him and watch him die after all. But Jake kept his hand extended, kept looking at her with those warm, patient eyes. Kirith slowly reached out. Her fingers trembled. She touched his palm with just the tips of her fingers at first. No burning, no redness, no darkening veins. She pressed her whole hand against his. No pain, no death, nothing but warmth. Jake's fingers closed around hers, holding her hand firmly. Kirith felt the pressure of another person's touch for the first time in 307 years. A sob escaped her throat. Then another. Then she was crying, really crying, for the first time in longer than she could remember. "Told you," Jake said softly, smiling up at her even though he was clearly exhausted. Stubborn human biology. Kirith laughed through her tears. The sound was half sob, half joy. She squeezed his hand tighter, afraid that if she let go this moment would disappear, that she would wake up and find it was all a dream. But Jake squeezed back. "Real, solid, alive. Don't ever scare me like that again," she whispered. "No promises. I'm pretty good at getting into trouble." Dr. Rhodes cleared her throat from the doorway. "I'll give you two some privacy. But Jake, you need rest. Lots of rest." She pointed at him sternly. "And that means sleep, not talking all night like you usually do." After she left, Kirith pulled a chair close to Jake's bed. She sat down but never let go of his hand. They stayed like that for a long time, just holding hands in silence. A week later, Jake was finally cleared to leave the medical bay. He was still healing from shrapnel wounds, but Dr. Rhodes said he could recover just as well in his own quarters. That evening, Kirith and Jake went to the station's observation deck. It was a large room with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out into space. Stars stretched endlessly in every direction. Nebulas glowed in the distance with colors that had no names. They sat together on one of the benches facing the windows. Kirith's hand was in Jake's. No gloves, no barriers, just skin touching skin. "The word spreading," Jake said, looking out at the stars. "First successful human-Valkyrie physical contact in recorded history. I've gotten messages from xenobiologists across 3 sectors asking for data. The medical journals want to publish Dr. Rhodes's research. There's even talk about establishing a formal exchange program between human and Valkyrie stations." Kirith leaned her head against Jake's shoulder. The simple act of resting against another person still felt like a miracle. "Humanity really doesn't know when to give up, do you?" she said quietly. "Not when it matters," Jake replied. He turned slightly and wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her closer. "Not when it's you." Kirith closed her eyes and let herself sink into the embrace. A proper hug, arms around each other, warmth and pressure and closeness. All the things she had dreamed about and given up hoping for centuries ago. For the first time in 307 years, Kirith was no longer alone. And it was all because one stubborn human engineer hadn't known when to quit.